Okay, welcome back. We're creating tables from the command line. So let's just go through the rules. So that the identity, not really a constraint per se, but that's the thing that turns on the auto number and what number to start with and what to increment. You could start at 100 and increment by 10, right? Or you can start at 1 and increment by 1 like what we did. Notice that the foreign key has a references keyword where it's similar to the way a join works. We have to tell it the column on my side and the table and column on the other side. FK constraints I typically do on 2 lines just because I don't like it to be that long. And so I want to see that those actions, the on delete and the on update, I want to see that in every single one of these things. Are you paying attention? Every single foreign key constraint you ever build for the rest of the course, I want to see that. Okay, good. By the way, the on delete and on update is only for foreign keys. It doesn't have anything to do with primary keys, right? Okay, good. So does the order of these things matter when you're creating these guys? Or, well, you know, could I have referenced the major table without a major table? No. So this would have failed when I executed this guy. Before I forget, let me go ahead and execute this guy. Yay! Okay, it worked. So building the tables is kind of sort of important. And just as a reminder, the foreign key is never, ever, ever an auto number. The only really place you should ever use auto numbers, I mean, okay, that's not a real rule, but a practical rule, is for a primary key, and that's it. Okay, let's talk about these constraint actions on page 339. So the default is no action. What does that mean? That means if I intend to insert a student into the table and there's no matching row at the other end, no action means, actually no action should say something like don't bother or something. I don't know, like no, you can't do this. If I try to delete a major, it's going to come back and say, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So no action means stop me from doing something. Okay, kind of makes sense? Okay. All right, so the default action is the no action, which means just throw up an error when things, so if a student has a major of 10, and I go to the major table and attempt to delete the row 10, it's going to come back and say, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Good. Cascade is, if I delete the major 10, it goes and finds all the students who have that as a major and removes their rows too. Wow. All right, let me rephrase this. When you say on delete cascade, what that means is if you kill the parent, it hunts down all the children and executes them. Kill the parent, all the children die. Okay. And then there's another one called set null. Like if I go in here and delete, delete the parent row, the child rows get altered, so they just have a null in there. That works pretty good because we told it that we allowed nulls. Okay. And the other one, the fourth one, is set to the default. I could have a default setting for a major. I don't, but if I did, had a default was 10. And so whenever you deleted something, it would come in and say, well, okay, you deleted the parent, so I'm going to take all the children and change them to the default value for that. Okay. All right. You guys ready? So I'm going to do a compound one here. I'm going to kind of fake it here because I don't have a table that does that. But let's just pretend, okay? I'm going to pretend. This is clearly not going to work, but that's beside the point. So I'm going to say constraint, and then some other foreign key, something, I guess I got to spell it right. So constraint with, I don't know, some foreign key, some compound key. So there'd be some foreign key on my side. So it'd be 2 keys, right? It has to be like this. So I would just say, well, I don't know, major ID and something else. Right? This is fake, right? And then references. Whatever, like major ID and something else. Okay, and then of course, I'm going to go in here and say, on delete no action. And on update, no action. Okay, this clearly isn't going to work, but that's beside the point. What I was after is showing you how to do a compound foreign key. You don't do, so one primary key constraint can have multiple keys. You don't go in there and make like part 1, part 2, part 3. No, you have one of them that has all 3 parts, okay? I'm going to erase this because it drives me nuts to see all that red. Okay. All right, is that kind of sort of making sense? Okay, good. So on page 339, they show this example. No, they don't. Here we go. Here's their example talking about the artist and the work. Okay, so notice that here the artist is the primary key, and you can tell they have a constraint for the primary key, and then they have a constraint for uniqueness. Okay, I kind of like that. So that is one of the types of constraints, whether or not, the first name and last name has to be unique. And so they use an identity here. Okay, good. But when you get down to here and you put the artist ID, notice that there is not an auto number here. It's an auto number only at the primary key. It's never, ever an auto number on the foreign key. All right, so I have a work, I have another unique constraint, and then I have a foreign key constraint, which points back to the artist, and we use the typical no action thing. And here we even have a default. So by the way, that's how you do defaults. It's considered a row default, right? It's not a table default. So row kind of things, trying to get into the rows. These are considered table constraints for the most part. There's a couple of exceptions. This distinction will make a little bit of sense now, but when we get into the check constraints, then no. Anyway, these are explicit constraints, and here's because I don't consider identity a constraint, and I don't consider default a constraint. Come on, those aren't really constraints. Maybe some other word would fit in a little better. Okay. So, one more time, let's talk about relationships. So this should be a review, right? Nothing new here. So, in a one-to-many, when the parent is optional, you basically go to the foreign key, which is going to be on the child side, isn't it? Yeah, good. And you set the foreign key to allow nulls. In a one-to-many, where the parent is required, no problem. Go to the foreign key, set it to not null. Okay. So in a relationship where the parent is optional, a one-to-one where the parent is optional, first of all, I don't like the word parent and child when you get to a one-to-one because there's no clear distinction which one is the parent and which one is the child. So I typically say like left-hand side, right-hand side kind of a thing. Okay. So it's the same thing wherever that foreign key is, which you would call the child, but really it's not a child. But anyway, basically same thing. I would create the null and unique, and then if it's required, it'd be not null and unique. Okay, so that hopefully this is all a review because that's exactly what we're going to do. So the unique typically only happens in one-to-ones. Okay. You could have a unique for other reasons, like for example in here, this has nothing to do with making it one-to-one. They just wanted to make sure that we didn't actually type in an artist twice. Okay, kind of makes sense. And here, the title and copy, we didn't want to make sure that didn't show up more than once. Making sense. Okay, so we only have 2 tools in the toolbox. Null and not null on the foreign key, and unique on the foreign key. That's it. That's the only two tools we have. Okay, so one more time, just to hammer this home. Hopefully this is all making sense. Let's talk about one more time. Where does the foreign key go? Okay, if it's a one-to-many, case closed, no discussion. It's always on the many side, period, full stop. That one's easy. A many-to-many, that one's easy because it's a trick question. Neither side, because we're going to need an intersection table, and that's where the foreign keys are going to be. Okay, so now we end up with one-to-one, optional. Pick one. It really doesn't matter. There's no real rule. One-to-one, mandatory, mandatory. Pick one. It doesn't really matter. Maybe you would pick the one that's like the more volatile of the two. Okay, maybe. And then one-to-one, mandatory, and optional. Okay. I have to put it on the foreign key has to go on the optional side to be able to, in order to enforce a mandatory. You don't ever enforce an optional. That doesn't even sound like English, does it? But so I have to be on the optional side so I can enforce the mandatory. So that's where foreign key goes. Good. On page 341, they start talking about the defaults. So in our world, the default happens after the null keyword. Not every database does it that way. So for example, in Microsoft SQL Server, it appears after the null or not null. Okay? But I believe it's Oracle. I don't remember which one it is now. It goes before. So you're just going to have to remember this stuff. I apologize. So here's an example of a null default with an unknown. Cool. All right, no problem. So let's go ahead and do another example here. Let's. I'm gonna. Well, okay. I guess I'll create a fake table and we'll do something with it. Okay. So I'm gonna say create table tip because I don't plan on keeping it around. And I'm gonna go ahead and do the parentheses things. Okay, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, you know how sometimes you have a 2-letter abbreviation for the state, like for your address? So I'm going to type, state, and then I'm going to say in varchar. Ooh, maybe not in varchar if it's going to be 2 and exactly 2. I could just do in char 2. Okay, and then let's say, I don't know, let's say I'll allow nulls, and then I would just say default. And then put in whatever you want the default to be, like that. Okay? That kind of makes sense? Okay. Now, see the word state showed up in blue? State is considered a reserved word. So to make reserved word issues go away, I'm going to use the square brackets. Okay? And see, now I turned black, so we're good to go. So obviously, table and int and identity and all these things, I don't really know why that's in the another color, but hey. So this is just, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but I put state inside a set of square brackets in order to tell it, hey, this is not a keyword. Okay, so the question comes up, when does the default actually happen? When does it get asked to perform its mission? Okay, this is a little complex because I'm not absolutely certain that every single database does this the exact same way. Okay, so when you do an insert of the table, if you left that one blank, the machine would go, oh, well, okay, I'll just put the default in there for you. Cool. That way I just don't have to type the Texas thing. It'll always come out. Cool. When doing an update, if I update something and I can use the default keyword to force that to go to whatever the default is if I didn't already know. Okay? So either you ignore that column when you're inserting, or you use the default keyword to tell the machine, I don't know what the default is, but whatever the default is, I want you to use that. And we're going to do an insert with that coming up here in just a minute. Okay, another cool thing, a really cool thing for doing defaults is I can use functions here. So let's say, I don't know, creation date. Okay, and this is going to be date time. And I'm going to make it not null. And then I'm going to say the default. But instead of actually putting the text in there, I'm actually going to type in a command that makes it work called getDate. Like that. And functions require, parentheses. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You guys know how this works.